Hello, and welcome to Breakfast in the Ruins, a Michael Moorcock flavoured podcast. After something of a break since part 1, Natasha's joined me again to look at the second part of The Jewel in the Skull. And much like the last Tash show, this was recorded several weeks ago, but ended up getting overtaken by an Elric episode with Loz. This is largely thanks to a habit Tash and I have developed over the years of having a few tipples, some excellent food, and then generally losing any kind of discipline for the task that lays in front of us. And this show is no exception. Thanks to a truly enjoyable combination of rums, in this case Jamaica Cove Black Pineapple rum, and the now ubiquitous, certainly at Tash's house, Angostura 1787, and a veritable feast of scrummy comestibles and hot sauces, you can take the gale out of Trinidad, etc. Tash's dogs are also back with us, and they make their presence known in the most doggy of ways throughout. Tail wagging, squeaky toys, some huffing, and other doggy things which I won't mention here right now. As for the subject matter, we finally meet Dorian Hawkmoon, and we get some further details regarding the dastardly Grand Britannians. But I won't go into any further detail, as these podcasts are spoilery enough as they are. So, sit back, enjoy some victuals, and join us at Derry and Tom's as we take a look at the second part of Michael Moorcock's The Jewel in the Skull. So, I'm back with Natasha in Derry and Tom's roof garden, which isn't really Derry and Tom's roof garden, but once again we're in the Derry and Tom's roof garden frame of mind to cover the next part of The Jewel in the Skull. Hello, Natasha.
Hello.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year!
So, what are your New Year's resolutions?
Let's not even.
Okay, let's not go there.
Well, no. I try to make minute-by-minute resolutions. Sometimes they last the minute, sometimes they pass the minute. Who knows? Life is not about a day.
I've only got one New Year's resolution.
Did you?
Yeah. I found out there's a members-only anarchists club in my town. And it's my absolute intention.
Do you have to fill in the right amount of forms, though?
You have to fill in the form, but you also have to be nominated by a member. And very amusingly, one of the people that I communicate with on Twitter, Kay, said that she played there in the 80s when she was 17 in a band. And she asked for some milk for a tea, and she was told that milk is murder and told off for wanting it.
So now you want to be in it?
So now I want to be in it, yeah. I think it generally attacks a younger crowd these days, which of course I include myself.
You would hope so.
Yeah.
And it takes me straight into... Yesterday I spent the day... I eventually articulated it fairly sloppily to a friend via WhatsApp to say I spent the day fighting inertia, and inertia's winning. But surely that is like against the laws of physics.
Yeah.
Which is a bit like having a members-only anarchist club.
Yeah. But that could be like one of the chief laws of the multiverse, couldn't it? Inertia always wins.
But filling the right amount of information to get into your anarchist club seems a little bit... Is that what gets you kicked out of the anarchist club?
I don't know.
If you send the form in with, like, I don't know, a turd on it or something, they just go, yeah, you're in.
Well, I'm hoping I'll just turn up and say, look, I do a Michael Moorcock podcast, let me in.
I could fight you all.
Yeah. or I will simply fight you to gain access.
Because I still have milk in my brews, so I have far more.
Yeah, I've got protein and calcium in my bones, let me in. Yeah, so that's my New Year's resolution. And also to keep up with the podcast, because we've had a very nice response to it. And
we had a response to it.
And as you know, there were some people on Twitter who said that they thoroughly enjoyed the episode that we did last.
Bless them.
Particularly Tash's salty sailor talk, I think was one of the comments.
Yeah, well, I think maybe they're welcome to talk to me more often, but maybe they need to expand their social circle.
Yeah, possibly. But don't hold back on the salty sailor talk, I think, is the feedback from episode 1. So that's pretty good.
So to all the others who commented on anything else, we apologise, because all we've taken away from it is just keep saying fuck.
Yeah, very much so. And also to keep on kicking off our podcast by drinking rather excellent rum. So you'll have to remind me what rum we're drinking, because I've completely forgotten. Jamaica Cove Black Pineapple rum. And it's absolutely delicious, particularly with a drop of coconut water, which is what we're having at the moment. Yeah, bravo. More than happy with this.
And
sorry.
Cheers.
Let's, here's to 2020. Lovely. I'll just take a guzzle. Delicious. So, when we left it last time off, Count Brass had just...
the Brassy Count.
The Brassy Count had taken Melidas to task for trying to essentially kidnap his daughter Iselda. We've not even met Hawkmoon yet. Melidas wants Count Brass to join in the Grand Britannian War on the rest of Europe. Count Brass isn't up for it, much to the disappointment of Beaugentle and Iselda, who were very, very anti-Grand Britannia. And thinking back on that, it's interesting that whole first book, those 4 chapters, are bookended by the Count having a fight with a monster of some description. It starts off with him fooling and offering a way out to a monster that is a monster not by its own design, that is actually in some ways a victim of old crimes by the previous occupant of the Camargue, but he very brutally dispatches it. Then at the end, you've got a very, very human monster who Count Brass actually gives a way out and shows a level of, what's the expression, noblesse oblige, is it? Where someone's status is recognised in how they're dealt with, and basically gives Melidas a pass, even though he tried to kidnap his daughter and everything else, and turned out to be a true rotter.
And I think you've visually portrayed him very well, haven't you? Because I've seen the picture finally that you posted online on your page.
Peter Wingard.
Yeah, so we know exactly what kind of slimy creature Count Brass has seen off with compassion, and that same kind of foolish inevitability that we need as a narrative hook to continue through the books. I draw my button straight to, if you remember, 24, wasn't it? The Kiefer Sutherland thing. Now, I didn't watch all of them, but I am peripherally aware of, apparently there's an outside world away from me.
I'm aware there is a Kiefer Sutherland. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm not convinced of the Keith Sutherland. However, anyway. So the belief is that there was this show, in which in every season, his daughter gets kidnapped every fucking episode.
Yeah.
And you go, well, at what point are you going to cut your losses, mate?
Yeah.
Either she's too stupid to live, or she's just too unlucky to live, or whatever. She's meant to die, or so there's this kind of. Why don't you just give the bad guy enough rope, or why don't you just make the victim attractive enough? So it's a narrative hook, because essentially it could have ended there.
Yeah.
Could have killed him, could have seen him off, and it might have been a while before Grand Britannians turned their attention to the area, thinking, actually they are really that impenetrable.
Yeah.
And as they continue to, without giving too many spoilers in the next few books, take over the rest of the world and then come back. Oh, no. We'll take it personally. Great hook.
And to be fair, if Count Brass had done the right thing, we wouldn't have a story, would we? So, hooray.
It would be a short story with, write to Andrew on Twitter and tell him what you think about whether people should do the common sense thing and kill the bad guy because he looks like a bad un, he smells like a bad un, he sounds like a bad un, and he's trying to steal your daughter. Do you run the knife through him and leave him there, or do you carry it on for how many books have we got of Hawkmoon?
4 in the initial sequence. Yeah.
And then
there's the Chronicles of Castle Brass, which is 3 more.
Right.
But they're called the Chronicles of Castle Brass, but they're not really that much about Castle Brass. We'll get to that in due time.
I do love to jump to the end.
Yeah. I'm actually now really, really pleased. You see, I can barely gather my words. I'm so pleased that Melidas is still alive, because the first couple of pages of the next part of the book I think are absolutely amazing and make me... There are some bits of Melidas that are absolute pure gold in the following pages, but... Book 2 begins with Melidas back in Londra, capital city of Grand Britain, brooding and plotting to bring down Count Brass and to destroy utterly the Camargue and to own Iselda, because he's pretty much obsessed with Iselda. And we get a really nice description of his pad. Let's have a look. In his tall tower of obsidian overlooking the blood-red River Tame, where barges of bronze and ebony carried cargo from the coast, Baron Melidas paced his cluttered study with its tapestries of time-faded browns, blacks and blues, its orreries of precious metal and gemstones, its globes and astrolabes of beaten iron and brass and silver, its furniture of dark polished wood, and its carpets of deep pile the colour of leaves in autumn.
I think I've shagged him.
That's an awesome pad, really, isn't it? That is a cracking pad. In some ways, that might actually be my dream house.
Really?
Yeah, it's certainly my dream study.
You're aspirationally an evil knight.
Yeah, it's certainly my dream study in a tall tower of obsidian overlooking a blood-red river. Oh, God, yeah. I'd have a bit of that. So I'm warming to Melidas a little bit, because I think he's actually he's got a little bit of sartorial elegance.
He's at least got taste in houses.
Yeah. And it continues. Around him, on the walls, on every shelf, in every angle, were his clocks.
So, just to introduce the dogs this week, that would be Niles downstairs, barking at no one. That'll be his sister joining in. This'll pass, like all good things. We will let them live, because if the evil bastards live through this episode, then everyone fucking lives through this episode. So, as we continue on.
Yeah. Around him, on the walls, on every shelf, in every angle, were his clocks. All were in perfect synchronisation, and all struck on the quarter, half, and full hour, many with musical effects. There were various shapes and sizes in cases of metal, wood, or certain other less recognisable substances. They were ornately carved, to the extent sometimes that it was virtually impossible to tell the time from them. They had been collected from many parts of Europe and the Near East, the spoils of a score of conquered provinces. They were what Baron Melidus loved most among his possessions. Not only this study, but every room in the Great Tower was full of clocks. There was a huge four-faced clock in bronze, onyx, gold, silver and platinum at the very top of the tower, and when its great bells were struck by life-size figures of naked girls holding hammers, all Londra echoed with the din. So what it's telling us is he actually lives in the Tower of Westminster. The Tower of Westminster is a massive obsidian tower with a fucking great pad at the top and bells that are struck by life-size figures of naked girls holding hammers. Okay, maybe that's a bit queasy, but all the rest of it, I'm kind of up for.
Well, you haven't seen the inside, so how would you know?
Yeah. Well, we've seen his study, and I dig his study.
You haven't seen the inside of the Tower of London, so it might be inside naked women.
Yeah, very true. Yep. That is very true. I've never actually considered that. But soon he gets the news. He's a bit miserable, Melidus, at this point, but he soon gets the news that might perk him up a little bit. So, 2 years prior, Melidus took the province of Colne, disemboweled the Earl Duke, personally and publicly, because, that's just what you do. And more recently, the Earl Duke's upstart son led a rebellion and almost crushed the Grand Britannian forces there, but they were crushed by Grand Britain reinforcements. Flame lances, ornithopters, all that good stuff. And this is our first reference now in the book to Dorian Hawkmoon. And I think it's straight away the heroism of our main character, Hawkmoon, is basically knocked cockeyed into an old hat. Because I've just closed my book. God damn it.
He begins bound in chains of gilded iron, as befitted his station. Stumbled down the gangplank from barge to quay, blinking in the evening light and staring around him at huge menacing towers of Londra. It's not the most grand entrance. I mean, at least Brass was brassy.
And
notably brassy. They took a moment to mention his brassiness before they mentioned, how his back was up against a wall. And
this, it's not so much a revelation when you read it for the first time, because you don't know who he is. But rereading it again for quite a while, for many, many years later, it is a revelation. Because you've read all these Hawkmoon books, and you kind of invested in the character, just this tiny little passage, which kind of casts a slightly different light on him. The Duke of Colne had offered himself as a mercenary commander to the Dark Empire and been accepted, had fought well in the service of Grand Britain at Nurnberg and Ulm, winning the confidence of the Empire, gaining command of a force comprised mainly of soldiers who had once served his father, then turning with them and marching back to Colne to attack the province. So actually, Hawkmoon fought for the Dark Empire, took part in battles in Nurnberg and Ulm, which means that, in all honesty, by association and by implication, he's done terrible things.
Mercenary.
Yeah, mercenary.
Soldier of fortune.
He may well have had that plan all along, that he would win the trust of Grand Britain in order to take his own place back. But in doing so, he was probably responsible for the murder of women and children and babies impaled on spikes and all those other things that Grand Britain do. So,
But I believe the phrase is, reportedly, I just did what I was instructed to do in the in the context of our existence.
It does fit the Moorcock pattern of our hero being a semi-bastard.
I do appreciate that, to be fair, because apologies to the listeners, because we're about to go down a slight side alley. What you don't understand is the amount of times this gentleman here has messaged me to say, have you read Dragonlance? To which I say, no, I've not read Dragonlance. It's like, I thought it was who you was talking to. I'm like, well,
I've got a terrible memory.
Yeah, I know. Well, I understand. many of our conversations become clouded in alcohol fog.
Yeah.
And also, you probably have this conversation with everyone, but by the fifth or sixth time you ask me, I bought the books.
Yeah.
Open the first book, starts with your classical fantasy poem.
Yeah.
Dragons are all bad.
Yeah.
Well, do you know what? If this is the start of like 2,000 pages, which it is, the idea that it's black and white is a little bit weak for a narrative. I like to see that, you know, they have the good days, they have the bad days. You will have your shouting at a spaniel days. That heavy breathing is my retriever, by the way. So you'll have the days which aren't as, what's the word? Morally led, shall we say. And so to read a fantasy writer who understands that it's shades of grey, it's not a digital but it's an analog world. So if you're a mercenary and you can apply it to modern times, again like we were saying about the Second World War, you're a mercenary, you work for whoever pays you. And if you decide, I don't really like whoever pays me, but the other side are bastards as well. I mean, even Count Brass sat on the ethical fence, didn't he? He wasn't for or against them. He just saw that order would come whoever had the most
and Count Brass did his fair share as well.
Exactly. So I like that about these books, and that also wasn't me. In that it wasn't about, this is the shiny good guy who came from the village. The classic, and again, you know, I'll look feist, but you know, the classic, he was given up as an orphan and he was raised by the town cleric and he was raised as a good boy and he went off to fight but he never forgot his good lessons. The fact that we don't start there with this is good and this is bad, the fact that we start with a sense of reality of where we all find ourselves and then the future is up to us is something that I think is quite a positive and profound, particularly for the time and the size of the books that he takes on.
Yeah.
And back to you.
Hawkmoon's in pretty poor shape all round when we're introduced to him, isn't he?
I don't want to ruin it, but we'll see if he gets any better, shall we?
Yes. Yeah. So Meliadus is anxious that Hawkmoon has set an example to other people in Europe. But then he realises that an opportunity perhaps is dawning. So he ensures that on Hawkmoon's arrival at the Londra's prison catacombs that he's the first one to get into his ribs. So Hawkmoon's in pretty poor shape when he arrives. A guard in white leather and wearing the white metal death's head mask that was uniform to the order he served pushed him gently forward. Hawkmoon staggered in spite of the lightness of the pressure, for he had not eaten for almost a week. His brain was at once clouded and abstracted. He was hardly aware of the significance of his circumstances. Since his capture at the Battle of Colne, no one had spoken to him. He had lain most of the time in the darkness of the ship's bilges, drinking occasionally from the trough of dirty water that had been fixed beside him. He was unshaven, his eyes were glazed, his long fair hair was matted, and his torn mail and breeches were covered in filth. The chains had chafed his skin so that red sores were prominent on his neck and wrists, but he felt no pain. Instead, he felt little of anything, moved like a sleepwalker, saw everything as if in a dream. So he's in a bit of a terrible state. He's mentally beaten. He's pretty much shagged, isn't he? So on to chapter 2, the bargain. So Hawkmoon wakes up to see a wolf mask. Meliadus wants him in better shape, so he gets bathed, shaved, fed, quartered in luxury, given books, drugs, slave girls, none of which he's into because he's completely flat and uninterested in anything. But their essential plan is to give him loads of drug milk, get him fed, clean him up, get him to the barbers, so Meliadus can get him to the point where he can start to plot his revenge for not being able to make away from the Camargue with Iselda. And amusingly, he gets a little bit miffed, and this is another one of the things that entertained me about Meliadus, because Meliadus is trying his very, very best to goad Hawkmoon, and he did disembowel his father after all, but all his attempts fall flat because Hawkmoon's just like, whatever, I just want to go home. So there's some really quality Meliadus where are we? Shocked by a display of what he mistook for sentimentality, Baron Meliadus snapped, "What you do when you return, whether you make daisy chains or build castles, is of no interest to us. You will return, however, only if you perform your mission faithfully." Hawkmoon's introverted eyes glanced up at Meliadus. "You think I have lost my reason, perhaps, my lord?" "I'm not sure. We have means of discovering that. Our sorcerer scientists will make certain tests." "I am sane, Baron Meliadus. Saner, perhaps, than I ever was. You have nothing to fear from me." Baron Meliadus raised his eyes to the ceiling. "By the rune staff, will no one take sides?" He opened the door. "We will find out about you, Duke von Colne. You'll be sent for later today." And then he just pisses off, really cheesed off, that he can't get a rise out of Hawkmoon. I love that. You can just imagine Jason King, stroke Peter Wingard, putting his hands on his hips and looking to the ceiling going, oh, what? Oh, for heaven's sake. Well, anybody takes sides. So he's already had a Count Brass rebuff him. Now Hawkmoon's just like, I don't want to do anything, I'm not interested.
It's really interesting, though, because he starts quite pathetic.
Yeah.
And again, without ruining the end of the book, he stays kind of fucking pathetic. Like, he doesn't step into his dickheadness. He just kind of like, I'm a pitiful wretch of manipulation.
Yeah.
During me.
There is another character comes in later on, who, won't name him yet, but it does make things a little bit more interesting and has a little bit more pizzazz about him, who becomes one of his companions. Yeah.
Sorry. I'm looking forward to this discussion, because I don't know if we're going to see that the same.
Yeah. Well, of course, 20 years ago I thought it was cool. I'm not sure. We'll just have to check it out. We'll have to go on that journey together.
But I think, again, the beauty of the shortness of the books is you bring a lot to your own table. Yeah. Because actually, when you read through it, it's not described in that detail. It's what you want to project onto it and take away with you. Because actually, when I read it, I'm like, I remembered there being more formative relationship building things. Are like, do you want to be my friend? All right, let's go.
That's very much a Moorcock thing, isn't it?
Yes.
But we'll mention his name, William de Verck, or de Ver, or whatever his name is. My memories of him is that is he a fake Frenchman? I can't quite remember. But I'm really, really hoping that the dashing de Ver kind of manages to maintain some level of, I have a dog sniffing my nuts. Leave my nuts alone. Everything's fine.
And for the outside viewers, that's why you just hear me go, shh.
Yeah.
Not, just go there. Just go there. Sniff his nuts. Go. Come here. Yeah. Come on. I haven't actually taught them to sniff your nuts.
Okay, so later, Hawkmoon's taken to the palace of the King Emperor of Gran Bretagne. Okay, here we go. It's pronunciation time. Huon. What would you go with? Juan. Okay, we'll go with Juan. And we get a little taste of kind of what Gran Bretagne is like. The palace rose tier upon tier, almost out of sight. 4 great towers surmounted it, and these towers glowed with a deep golden light. The palace was decorated with bas-reliefs depicting strange rites, battle scenes, famous episodes in Gran Bretagne's long history, gargoyles, figurines, abstract shapes, the whole a grotesque and fantastic structure that had been built over centuries. Every kind of building material had been used in its construction and then coloured so that the building shone with a mixture of shades covering the entire spectrum. And there was no order to the placing of colour, no attempts to match or contrast. One colour flowed into the next, straining the eye, offending the brain. The palace of a madman, overshadowing, in its impression of insanity, the rest of the city. Pretty gauche, frankly.
Or how I see London.
Unfiltered. Yeah.
When you consider since his days we've had the gherkin and all sorts of other hideous erections in London.
Yeah.
Take it as you will.
Yeah. But of course on this occasion he's not there to see King Juan. He'll see King Juan later. He's there to be taken to a vast hall of weird machines where he meets Baron Caelan of Vital. Vital, okay. Chief scientist of the King Emperor. And he's dined and given booze. He's dined in silence with Baron Caelan. But there's a bit that made me chuckle, where after he's been dined, he's given wine. And it says, Hawkmoon tasted the wine. It was excellent. My own invention, the wine, said Caelan, and smirked. It is unfamiliar, Hawkmoon admitted. What grape? No grape, but grain, a somewhat different process. It is strong. Stronger than most wines, agreed the Baron. Is that fucking barley wine? Has Baron Caelan invented barley wine?
Oh, is it one of those Belgian beers at like 21%?
It could be, but that seemed a little bit too swish, I think. I reckon Baron Caelan has invented barley wine and he's putting gold foil around the top of his bottles. We can't have a
decently strong ale. God forbid. No. Belgium?
No.
How far away is that? No, not in England. Not London. Never.
I reckon Baron Caelan has invented... What was that?
Says pro-Brexit, Andrew.
Yeah, well, good Lord. What have those aspersions cast? I think he's totally invented barley wine, and it's going to be wrapped in gold foil and everything in tiny bottles.
Well, just like obviously 21st century culinary skills require a certain amount of gold leafing to every shite, everything.
Yeah. What was the brand of barley wine in pubs when we were youngsters? where you always had the old geezer at the end of the bar who sat and drank their small bottles of barley wine with the gold foil round the top. If anybody can remember, tweet me and remind me what that was called, because I once tried it and it's fucking horrible. It was one of the worst drinks I've ever had.
I've tasted that. I've also blocked out the name.
Yeah.
I know the one.
Yeah.
I know the one.
Probably the trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah, you repressed the trauma.
But now I went away from any bottle that's got a slight gold trim around the top,
Yeah.
just in case.
Yeah. Well, speaking of repressed trauma, Hawkmoon finds out that he's there to have his sanity evaluated by Baron Kalin with the help of the mentality machine, which is kind of a wonderful invention. And of course, we both have, to one degree or another, backgrounds in working in mental health. And I think the idea of a giant mentality machine that's basically a fleshy bell that you plug someone into, I don't know, I think that could fly.
I was going to say, has that already happened? We've not had those.
I don't know. I hope not. But I hope we get the opportunity to invent it and patent it. I don't know, maybe not. It just sounds a bit weird.
But will it sell, Andrew?
Will it sell? Well...
It's not like I thought it was have particularly ethical jobs. We're both looking at Hawkmoon going, you lucky bastard. Well, you get the choice of bastards to work for. We'll just take the money.
well, since he's got to Gran Bretagne, I mean, obviously he's traumatised and everything else, but he's had quite an easy ride of it so far. I think the mentality machine, he doesn't really seem that overly bothered about that. Kalin asked him to get in it, so... He says, at last the bell completely covered him, and its fleshy sides moved in to mould themselves around his body. It was an obscene embrace, and would have horrified the Dorian Hawkmoon had fought the Battle of Cong, but this new Hawkmoon felt only a vague impatience and discomfort. He began to feel a crawling sensation in his skull, as if incredibly fine wires were entering his head and probing at his brain. Hallucinations began to manifest themselves. Okay, yeah, so at that point it maybe doesn't sound like that practical an answer to mental health services.
Again, these were written post-World War II.
Yeah.
Like your 1960s US military LSD drug experiments on their whoever they could catch and offer it to in a sugar cube.
Uh-huh.
So it's not wildly... sugar cube. Yeah, so it's not wildly like separate. This is the thing about his writing, is that it's like Our World but a bit sexier.
Yeah.
Which is tragic, really, because it isn't really a positive world. However, there's so many comparisons to what we consider normal.
Yeah. Our world, bit sexier, bit weirder, bit more. I don't know. Is it a bit more depraved than ours? No, it just brings it to the surface, doesn't it?
It's openly depraved.
It's openly
That's
depraved.
the difference.
Yeah.
So you've got those crazy flamingos, we've got Farage. You've got, you hang them from the street, you go down to a cell and you pay if you've got a lot of money and you'll never be fucking caught.
Yeah.
So we don't live in a particularly different world, just ours is, it's really well cast, as in the Indian terms of cast, as in if you can fucking afford it, have what you want, get away with it, continue for your lifetime. If anything, this is almost, the arguments that say we've had multiple cycles of civilization. This is almost like 20 cycles on from that, where we've now, the powers that be have managed to mask it to the point that the ordinary people go on pretending there isn't child rape going on within a 25-mile radius of you that will never be persecuted. And we know, because we've had the evidence for hundreds of years, but we'll still just carry on. Whereas if you hang them to the actual lamppost, which is, that old... What's the word I'm looking for? Apologies for having to cut this out. But the old approach to what we should do with politicians is they'll just hang from the lamppost. I'm like, well, great, but we tried that. But actually, we won't find the people to hang from the lamppost because either they'll cover their arse or they'll have a volunteer, victim in front of them, or something will happen. That means that they get to carry on. Yeah. So I would almost say to the Twitter folk out there who want to talk to Andrew, because I've removed myself from Twitter, no offence personally to you, if you can think of a way that you can evidence, from a philosophical debate, how we can prove that we do not live 3 or 4 centuries on from Hawkmoon, and it's actually a historical book talking about our past, because he did so well in replicating within a fantasy world the shit we were dealing with within our real world, and I don't think consciously we've healed that. Given our current political situation on any side of any Atlantic or Pacific or Indian Ocean or wherever you are in the world, you'll be looking out going, yeah, but did we get over that? At what point did we win? Because that's still happening, that still happens, that still happens, but we pretend it's all right. So if anything, he was a revolutionary, which at the time he was an anarchist. He was an anarchist, so he did want to raise these things to consciousness to get people discussing them, and he's had to wait however many years for me to have this conversation.
This is one of the reasons I loved Moorcock so much when I was 13 or 14.
Yeah, because you knew it. You and Hull, me and Stoke, we knew there was shit going on.
Well, the interesting thing is, while I was reading this, other things that I was getting off my granddad were things like Wheels of Terror by Sven Hassel, where the first chapter details the characters trying to dig buried children out during a firebomb raid by the RAF, trying to dig children out of cellars. And that was completely horrifying. So that's, on the one hand, I'm reading fantasy which has open depravity and terribleness, and on the other hand, I'm reading something that at the time was written 20 years before about events 30 years before that was fucking horrible as well. And it's, so you've got that thing.
It's almost the openness that's the difference, isn't it? Because what we don't have is the openness.
Yeah.
And in the last few months in British politics, I've said to a lot of friends, actually, because we were just said about our mental health background, it's like, actually, we know that things don't heal while they're still in shadow. So if you don't realise it's there, you don't recover from it.
Yeah.
So you have to bring it to the surface. Where with Moorcock, he was like, here it is on the surface, what do we need to heal? Whereas with us, we've got, one clown, one side of a river, and another clown, another side for a river.
Yeah.
That's metaphorical, guys. But, it's that matching of, we need to understand how we have got here before we can recover from it. Yeah. Whereas he's like, well, what happened was there was a good times and there was a bad times and there was this long time of bad times and we've got these people and they came from eons of this and blah, blah, blah. And we don't have that narrative. If anything, in our popular narrative, we only go back 1 or 2 wars.
Yeah.
We don't even really consider how we got into those wars.
Yeah.
We don't really understand who won.
Yeah.
And I use won in inverted commas. Even Ma was so upset with that she started wagging into the...
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's how much can we take out of anything? If you look at something long enough, how much can you infer behind it as a sense of a time and a place and a politics and a thinking and a... It's so fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good stuff. So I think maybe we can agree the mentality machine, we probably wouldn't try and invent it and patent it because it's a bit weird and sick.
I would say we've already got several.
Ah, yeah.
Have you seen the list? You've seen the list with your background of questions you can ask people to show if they're normal or not.
Oh yeah, have you ever been in a fleshy bell and had wires put in your brain? Yeah.
That's number 5.
I'll add that.
That's number 5.
I'll add that to the risk assessment. But the good news from the mentality machine, I should say, is that Baron Kalin says that the preliminary investigation says he's sane. Right. And the bad news is he's got to go in it again the next day. So he goes in it the next day. And
that's supreme competence in technology, that is.
And Baron Kalin once again...
Is that a private sector healthcare service? Hold on, let me turn the page.
This could be the very start of something amazing where we make a lot of money by doing really, really unethical things.
By Booper.
So, Baron Kalin says, it seems that you are, in some peculiar way, too sane, my Lord Duke. A paradox, eh? Aye, too sane. As if some part of your brain has disappeared altogether or has been cut off from the rest. However, I can only report to Baron Melidus that you seem eminently suited to his purpose, so long as sensible precautions are taken. So, they're happy that he's too sane. Probably described, I don't know, is it dissociative disorder? Possibly. We'll have to ask friend of the show, Sacco So, who's actually a psychiatrist. There you go. Got a psychiatrist listening to
No, you see, so psychiatrists and psychotherapists are kind of in the same camp of, psychiatrists want to drug them, psychotherapists want to torture them, psychologists are the ones who'll give you your categorisation.
Ah, yeah. I'm glad we stopped there because we could have gone down a really, really rapid route of upsetting all of the professions.
Yeah, so psychiatrists, come to me if you want to drug me. I'll talk to you. But if someone wants to tell us what's wrong with us, we need a separate type of psy.
You need a mentality machine.
Yes.
Yeah. But anyway, Melidus is satisfied and hatches his plan. He's going to send Hawkmoon to the Camargue to seek sanctuary in the confidence of Count Brass and then have him kidnap Yzelda, obviously, in return for getting his lands back. And Hawkmoon's all, yeah, sure, whatever, man. Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, all right. Once again,
Melidus is kind of discomforted by Hawkmoon's passivity and gets irritable again. He's like, God, you could at least argue back. Didn't expect you to say all right.
It sounds like the Andrew Lloyd Webber Jesus Christ Superstar, though, isn't it? It's that Pontius Pilate scene. To be fair, Andrew Lloyd Webber probably stole it from here, going, what's wrong with you? Can you not be upset? It's like,
bloody hack.
Yeah, I'm Jesus. So that's where the Christianity learned from Moorcock.
Yeah.
Moving on.
So
before I get the death threat.
He adds the kicker of the Black Jewel. So the Black Jewel is going to, in some way, ensure Hawkmoon's commitment to the plan despite his passivity. So Chapter 3, the Black Jewel, and Hawkmoon's soon back at Caelan's labs and is introduced to the machine of the Black Jewel, a product of weird and obscure sorcery, not of Grand Britannian origin. And I love this. Caelan bought a grimoire off some dude and built it himself. He basically bought... He
downloaded it from that thing that says, how do I blow people up?
Yeah.
He downloaded that thing and then he got some bleach in, and what he did was he made his home version.
Yeah, he bought a grimoire from a dodgy bloke and built this machine himself. It's kind of like those people...
Like
those people on Tinterweb who buy instructions to build weather machines and things like that, which I seem to recall was a thing about 10, 15 years ago. The early days of the internet. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm dissing it because, where's the sun? Do weather machines only create clouds, or can they get rid of them? I'm not an expert.
It depends on the weather machine, doesn't it?
Yeah. So the second day running, Caelan is asking... Well, the third day running, Caelan is asking Hawkmoon to enter a weird machine. There was pressure from within his skull, and he felt a sense of absolute warmth and softness suffuse his body. He drifted as if bodiless and lost the sense of passing time, but he knew the machine was spinning something from his own substance, making something that became hard and dense and implanted itself in his forehead so that suddenly he seemed to possess a third eye and stared out at the world with a new kind of vision. Then gradually this faded and he was looking at Baron Caelan, who had removed his mask the better to regard him. That actually sounds quite cool. I don't think that sounds too terrible. That's definitely... Moorcock was taking some hefty doses of whatever he could get his hands on.
Experimentally at the time.
Yeah, because he describes a quite groovy trip quite easily there. So, all of a sudden, Hawkmoon now has got this bloody Black Jewel in his brain, well, at the front of his head, anyway. And so Caelan shows Hawkmoon that he's now basically got a funky mystical camera in his head, and they can see everything now that he does. Although we'll find out later on, they can't hear what he does. Which I think, okay, all this super sorcery, technology, magic is pretty groovy, but it only shows visuals.
So it's emergent technology that they've dug up from somewhere.
Yeah. Well, he bought it from a dodgy bloke at a bazaar.
So Google, Waswell Technology, home build.
Yeah.
See what you come up with. Start testing it on people today, and the future might be yours.
And if it don't capture audio, it's shit. You've been had. You've been had.
But we can merge it with something else.
Yeah. So next up, Melidus escorts Hawkmoon to an audience with King Emperor Huan. So we finally get to meet King Emperor Huan. And we found out Huan is basically a wizened old fetus in a big milky globe.
The boy in the bubble.
That speaks with like a young child's voice. And controls his gear inside the globe with a prehensile tongue.
But is
pretty gross.
But is that the guy that Paul Simon was singing about in The Boy in the Bubble?
I don't know. I don't know the song. You'd have to tell me.
I would have to tell you.
Yeah.
Well, Google it. Boy in the Bubble.
Yeah,
Paul
don't
Simon,
tell me. Just Google it.
Tell me if they came in the 60s, 70s and went, we're too off our heads and acid to think of another idea, but this one sounds good.
Yeah.
The Boy in the Bubble.
Yeah. I think it probably is the...
Because it's imagery.
Yeah.
And imagery is really powerful. The same with symbolism, as it carries through. So Moorcock's the one that we've read.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that there wasn't one 100 years and 100 years before and 100 years before. And actually, the 3,000 years before, when this actually happened, and it was recorded and passed down in a narrative and a... So I'm just trying to weird out your listeners now.
No, that's cool.
I'm just trying to convince them all that it's real.
Yeah.
It's so real.
Yeah. I think it is also probably the influence for... the Emperor in Warhammer 40,000.
Yeah.
Which is like, ancient...
or the Emperor
3,000-year-old, whatever, kept alive by
if you ever had a mother-in-law, you'll find they look the fucking same, so I know where that theme came from.
Oh my god. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not even going to go down that road.
Put a cowl on the bitch. Put a cowl on the bitch.
I'm not going to go down there. Phil
You
will
see
listen to
it.
this.
You see it. For the audience, for the look on his face says he sees this. He sees it.
I see nothing.
He sees nothing.
I see nothing.
Phil, he sees nothing. The look on his face says he sees it. You edit what you want, my friend. You edit what you want.
He does. So he's a bit weird. He's a bit gross. He's probably influenced all sorts of other things, and possibly been influenced by other things as well.
It's the great thing. It's got a big head and slitty eyes and a little bit kind of weird skin. He looks old and he looks wise and
And anyway, he does have a word with Hawkmoon, and we get another little nugget of gold, Meliadus gold. So Juan says,
sex you up.
and you have made it clear to him that should he show any signs of betraying us, any slight sign which we may easily detect by watching through his eyes the faces of those he speaks to, we shall give the duel its full life. We shall release all the energy of the machine into its sibling. Have you told him, Baron Meliadus, that the duel, possessed of its full life, will then eat its way through his brain, devour his mind and turn him into a drooling, mindless creature? In essence, Great Emperor, he has been so informed.
I glossed over it, but he kind of knows.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Yeah. The thing in the throne globe chuckled. By the look of him, Baron, the threat of mindlessness is no threat at all. Are you sure he's not already possessed of the duel's full life? It is his character to seem thus, immortal ruler. And every time you get one of these little Meliadus cracks, I start to like him more and more, despite the fact
But
he's
look on
obviously
his face, come on.
super evil.
He's a dotard.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I absolutely love that. But this exchange is the first thing that starts to light the spark of Hawkmoon's returning personality, because he has a slight sense of irritation. It's brilliant.
The only thing that woke me up from my near-death experience is being pissed off with you, dickhead.
Yeah, it's like, fucking hell, these two are irritating. Oh, spark of humanity.
I know the feeling. If you've never been on the hormone pill, you don't know the feeling of waking up to annoyance. What the fuck? Where's the last 6 years gone? But you, sound of your breathing's pissing me off.
Yeah. Right.
To the women out there who aren't listening to this podcast, that was for you.
Do you reckon that they'll go the whole hog with a TV show? And what do you think? Because there's so much fantastic imagery. The first part with the Camargue and Count Brass was all really, really cool. But all this Grand Bretagne stuff is so fucking wacky and psychedelic.
Is it not all, number one, going to be filmed in Iceland?
Probably, yeah.
Because it's recognisable too, and she does the air things in the air.
Yeah. Bunny ears.
Fantasy.
She's doing bunny ears.
Bunny ears. Yeah. So it's recognisable to the fantasy followers.
Yeah.
Oh look, craggy rock outing. So they'll film in Iceland.
Yeah.
They will CGI their flamingos in. Meliadus will be Tom Cruise. I think we discussed it. They're all going to be Tom Cruise. No, hold on. So Meliadus will be the guy who plays the Loki in Marvel, because that's what the modern mind thinks of as. He'll have a British accent, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Hawkmoon will be. Do you know what he'll be? Do you know what? It's only literally just crossed my mind.
Yeah.
Die Hard 1. Hawkmoon, German. He's going to take Nakatomi Towers.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to release his mates.
Yeah.
But you know that... So this is how far back we go. We're like, you know what? The bad guy's going to be German. No, he fucking isn't. Yeah, he is. In this one, the bad guy's going to be German. He's going to look British. And he's going to kind of sound British.
Yeah.
But he's going to be German. So I'm seeing Alan Rickman. Yeah. So Alan Rickman...
Yeah.
would be the sexy version. Look, if Alan Rickman turned up and wanted to take away my innocent daughter, I'd be like, come on, you're Alan Rickman.
Yeah.
You're not that dirty guy that Andrew sent me on the internet. You're like a... I would give... Even if I thought you were slightly dodgy, you could have my daughter.
1970s Meliadus, definitely Peter Wingard, Jason King. 1980s Meliadus, yeah, Alan Rickman with his Tash from Die Hard.
And the accent.
Yeah, but 90s Meliadus, 2000s Meliadus, 2000s.
Let's not get...
And we're in 2020s now.
Nothing's
2020s
moved.
now.
Nothing's moved for the last 20 years. We haven't been allowed.
But who are those people out there? They would have to go on a
and the guy who
fucking
played
casting
Loki
journey.
in Marvel, he's British. Is it Tom somebody? Hiddleston?
Tom Hiddleston, but he's too famous. He's doing his Disney Plus stuff.
No. I don't mean about like what we know to be true. I mean about what we've been sold to be true, which is a slightly different thing. So him I know female friends who think he's hunky. Personally, I'd give him a pie, and that's not because I want to keep him, that's just because I want to feed him, because he looks like he needs a meal, and that's all right. If you could walk my dogs, you could so stay.
Yeah.
That's a different.
I think that's reasonable.
That's a different podcast. So that tune into Andrew.
More than reasonable.
But more than reasonable. Yeah. So modern guys, I mean, Eccleston could play either side. But there's not many people. Obviously, Tom Cruise could play everybody in the show, but everybody else would be.
I think this is a distinct problem that maybe not we've got, that I've certainly got, is that when I think of all the actors that I want to play these parts, they were all 10 years older than me when I was into them, and now they're all 60 plus.
So
So
we have to
I don't know who all these
we?
people are now. I think we'd have to have a massive casting.
I only know Hiddleston
campaign.
because I've got friends who like him.
Yeah, we'd have to have a massive casting campaign to find the 2020s version of Jason King. That's what we need. We need the all-new Peter Wingard.
Hashtag all new Peter Wingard.
Yeah, that's what we need. Right, let's get back on track. So, chapter 4, he's on his way to Castle Brass. So, Melidas kits Hawkmoon out with gear, and his cover story, which is something along the lines of, you drugged me, you escaped with a set of my armour, now you're escaping and seeking sanctuary. Yeah. And when you do that, you'll kidnap your Zelda and bring her back to me. And Hawkmoon's alright.
World's smallest violin, dickhead.
So it's flown by ornithopter to Dover, and what we really get is a 4 or 5 page travelogue now, which we won't go into any detail, but it is rather lovely. There's some really, really great descriptions of the Silver Bridge and all that business. There's
you started it with 4 or 5 page, not 40 or 50 page.
Yeah.
And then we stopped here for lunch, and then we met these people, and they gave us a rabbit, and the rabbit was delicious. It was the most delicious rabbit of the world.
Yeah.
It made us feel all buoyant on the inside, but then the next rabbit made us feel sad. 4 or 5 page, happy with it.
Yeah, rabbit is good. I mean, I'm into rabbit.
Let's eat the rabbit.
But this is all pure flavour, and there's a nice paragraph here that I really dug, which was when they get to Dover, and it says, at last they emerged through a guarded door into a paved street between the square, turreted buildings that filled the city. The streets were crowded with the warriors of Gran Breton. Groups of crow-masked flyers rubbed shoulders with the fish and sea serpent-masked crews of the men of war, the infantry and the cavalry in a great variety of masks, some of the order of the pig, others of the orders of wolf, skull, mantis, bull, hound, goat, and many more. Swords slapped armoured legs, flame lances clashed in the press, and everywhere was the gloomy jingle of military gear. Nice bit of flavour about what Dover's like. Basically, it's a military port, which is just non-stop activity. And you get a similar description of the Silver Bridge with the 30-mile bridge that spans the English Channel, which is kind of groovy. And it's basically just a constant press of war machines, booty returning from Europe. It's all really, really good stuff. Right, we just had a very quick break there and topped up on some, it was ham with piccalilli and what was that, hot pepper sauce? Moringa hot pepper sauce, which was absolutely bloody fantastic. And now we're on Angostura 1787 rum, which is, all I can say is it's bloody splendid. So let's continue.
This is what Gran Breton were bothered about. What's the word? Globalising the world for. They're like, hold on, this is delicious.
Yeah.
What could we possibly do, policy-wise? Because let's face it, we both work those roles. To make this spread across the world so everybody understands how delicious life can be.
Just tell everybody it's rubbish and only drink barley wine. Barley wine across the board.
Best it can be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Me and you now own Carlsberg and moving swiftly on.
Yeah. So during his journey to the Crystal City of Parai, Hawkmoon's not particularly careful with his disguise at an inn. But overnight he sees something of significance out of his window. And it says, during the night he was disturbed. Without realising what had awakened him, for some reason he felt drawn to the window and looked out. In the moonlight he thought he saw a figure on a heavy warhorse looking up at his window. The figure was that of a warrior in full armour, his visor covering his face. Hawkmoon believed he caught a flash of jet and gold, then the warrior had turned his horse and disappeared. Ah, the warrior in jet and gold. pops up quite a lot. Significant key character, mysterious character. That's our first mention of him. So Parai is physically in good nick, but it's an occupied city, and the text states, within the city the marks of occupation were everywhere, from the look of permanent fear on the faces of the common folk to the beast-masked warriors who swaggered the streets. The flags that flowed in the wind over the houses were once owned by Parai's noblemen. Now the flags were those of Jarek Nankinsen, warlord of the Order of the Fly, Erdaz Promp, Grand Constable of the Order of the Hound, Migel Holst, Archduke of Londra, and Azravak Mikozavar, renegade of Muscovia, mercenary warlord of the Vulture region, pervert and destroyer, whose legion had served Grand Britain even before our plan of European conquest became evident. Ooh, I'm quite pleased I managed to get his name right first time, but Azravak Mikozavar is a proper villain. So moving on from Parai and travelling further south, Hawkmoon sees the results of Mikozavar and co, and eventually passes to lands not yet conquered, where he's recognised by an old soldier of Colne and fated as a hero, but he sticks to his plan and his cover story. Soon he sees the lagoons and marshes of the Camargue and the heliograph flashing the old towers, telling Castle Brass of his approach. Finally, he has arrived at Castle Brass, where Count Brass entertains him, listens to his tale, and Yselda and Beaugentle are there, hoping he'll entreat the Count to take up arms, but Hawkmoon doesn't bite. He's just like, oh no, I just want some sanctuary.
Help me, sad.
Yeah, and
Him.
Yselda looked almost disappointed. It was plain that all in the room save wise Count Brass wanted war with Gran Breton. For different reasons, perhaps. Yselda to revenge herself against Melidas, Beaugentle because he believed such evil must be countered, and Von Villac simply because he wished to exercise his sword again. But Count Brass, he's satisfied. He offers Hawkmoon essentially unlimited sanctuary, can stay as long as he likes. And that night Hawkmoon thinks he sees the warrior in jet and gold again, and thinks, oh, who is this dude? I've seen him again. But then his thoughts turn back to accomplishing the kidnap. So at this point he's still thinking, oh, I've just got to get this out of the way. Get this out of the way and get the kidnapping done. But Beaugentle's on his case already, so Beaugentle quizzes him, because he's intrigued by his flat, emotionless manner. Yselda, on the other hand, well, as we discussed in the last episode, a dude's turned up in swish armour, so Yselda's all like, well, you know, I'm compassionate, I feel sorry for this guy. So she takes Hawkmoon walking in the gardens, feeling warmth and affection for this flat, sad dude with a black jewel in his forehead. So she encourages, whilst walking, arm in arm through the gardens, she encourages him to reminisce about Colne and his homelands. And Hawkmoon, Captain Buzzkill, responds thus. He sighed, an increasing trace of emotion entering his tone. The mark of the sword and the torch replacing the mark of the plough and the harrow. He turned to look at her, and the cross and gibbet were made from the timber of the yellow fences, and the carcasses of the cows and sheep clogged the watercourses and poisoned the land, and the stones of the farmhouses became ammunition for the catapults, and the people became corpses or soldiers. There was no other choice. And she actually takes that quite well, rather than thinking, fucking hell, dude, you know, I didn't really mean to find out, you know. It's like when you say, are you alright? Please don't tell me all of that.
No, I just meant, like, are you hungry or are you thirsty? I don't want to know, like, the full history.
I just wanted to hear what the haberdasheries were like.
What's the precy?
Yeah. So Count Brass turns up again, says, you know, you can stay as long as you like, but this evening there will be entertainment, including Beaugentle reading his latest works. And even Hawkmoon can't really get up for that. But that night, a banquet is attended by the great and good of the Camargue, and Beaugentle at Brass's urging reads poetry. For what then becomes 5 pages of the book is basically Beaugentle's poetry. It all gets a bit Lord of the Rings at this point, but of course there is a method anyway behind Beaugentle reading poetry for 5 pages, because Hawkmoon gets ill and keels over as Beaugentle basically relentlessly rhymes at him, getting all up in his face, giving some downright action rhyming. So anyway, it turns out Brass had his number all along, and he instructed Beaugentle to construct a rune in rhyme, because Count Brass recognises weird science when he sees it, and he's read about the Black Jewel in something or other in his library. So they're exploiting the fact that the Black Jewel doesn't record audio because it's a prototype Black Jewel.
When was this book written? Was it, 68,
67, 68.
There we go. Yeah. So the idea of having technology that could do both, and that, a bit like when I first read the 1984, it's like, why would anybody put a TV on the wall that just like took all the video and talked to them? Like, that's got to be stupid. And now we've got to the point where everyone's like, why not have a TV on the wall that just takes all the video and speaks to me?
Yeah.
Moving on.
So Count Brass has Bo Gentle caper about in front of Hawkmoon as if they're having some kind of conversation, then either stands behind him or stands in another room and tells him exactly what's going on and that they've got his number. So they'll lead him down to another area, and then Count Brass essentially shoots him in the head with a weird science gun and takes the life force out of the jewel and gives Hawkmoon a temporary reprieve, which will not last.
Bear in mind, Hawkmoon started mental. So we didn't start as sane as me and Andrew.
Yeah.
No. He started more crazy. Woo-hoo.
So Hawkmoon says, so I'm reprieved but not saved. How long does the reprieve last? And Count Brass says, I'm not sure. 6 months, almost certainly. Perhaps a year. Perhaps 2. But then again, it could be a matter of hours. I cannot deceive you, Dorian Hawkmoon, but I can give you extra hope. There is a sorcerer in the East who could remove the Black Jewel from your head. He is opposed to the Dark Empire and might help you if you could ever find him. Malagigi of Hamadan.
Hashtag conveniently.
Yeah, and thus begins the fairly common Moorcock trope of filling in all of the middle books in a sequence with MacGuffin-based quests in order to achieve something.
.tm plot device.
Yeah, so we have our MacGuffin-shaped quest lined up, where no doubt he will bump into someone and go, hey, let's be companions and travel together.
I'm sure it's not just Moorcroft, because that's like every part of fantasy.
Oh, it goes all the way back to Robert E. Howard. We discussed it when...
people who should be killed in long and slow quests.
Yeah, we discussed it in the last episode when we covered Tower of the Elephant with Phil, the Conan story. It's essentially a case where two people bump into each other and they go, hey, we're both kind of heading in the same direction. Let's adventure together.
Yeah.
Let's adventure together. And that's basically why I think if I ever play a fantasy role-playing game or anything like that and people are really heavy into backstory and you're being asked by the games master about your connections with A, B and C and asked to come up with an elaborate backstory, I'm not interested in any of that shit. We're adventurers. Oh look, here's another adventure. Let's adventure.
I believe we need to go there now.
Exactly. I mean exactly. That Angostura rum is starting to interfere with my mouth.
Whoops.
So, Count Brass Smile Riley, I give you back your life, and immediately you decide to sacrifice it because Hawkmoon's just said, oh, well, yeah, okay, this guy might be in Persia. So, well, what I'll do instead is I'll just go back to where I was a couple of days ago, team up with all the old soldiers and get killed fighting Grand Britain. But at least I might take some of them down with me. And we know that won't happen. Because quest available.
I do wonder, did Moorcock and in fact all the other fantasy writers ever work in the public sector? Because it's almost like they've nailed any programme team who've tried to deliver any kind of change in the last 30 years. I'm like,
that's absolutely true.
Should we turn up? Nah.
Yeah.
I just happen to be here because the last person did not sack me.
Yeah. There is an element of that. But no, Moorcock basically has been a writer his entire... Well, actually, no, he's been a writer and a musician. And as a teenager, he played blues in France.
It's like me. I've got loads of mates who I'm sure just take straight to the fucking screen.
Yeah.
Like, well, to be fair, Tash, your life is pretty tedious, but the shit you tell us we could not replicate in real life, nor could we find the evidence of it in real life. Therefore, we'll call it fantasy that somewhere in the future. Because back when he was getting published, the guys that we know didn't know that many people. So he would have been published, whereas there must have been a million people with those stories going, I'm on this project.
Well, I don't know. I think the beauty of those days, and this goes back to all the books my granddad used to give me. And one of the reasons why...
Is your granddad still alive?
No, he's been dead 20 years.
Because me and your granddad could have had a right good drinking session.
Yeah. The really... He gave me... I mean... At one point, I was just given 2 bin liners full of books because they'd all piled up. I used to get given them drip fed, and then one day my uncle had got a load, who'd been getting drip fed and by my granddad as well. He just gave me 2 bin liners full of books. And the wonderful thing about the 60s and 70s, and I think there was the thing about publishing in general, was it was so much easier to get published in those days. Because books sold, even if you were crap, books sold. I mean, if people like John Norman wrote the Gore
Copyright
books.
happened because Nina Simone and Al Green and what's his name? Flick through a couple of others there. Ray Charles. So all the great artists who came up with great things, they didn't have the legal rights to own their shit. And I think that must have happened across genres. Do you know what I mean? Like there was a lot of good things that were coming to the service in those days, but it's like, well, who owns the ability to spread this far and wide? It's a bit like the golden age of cinema. You've got like 4 great powerhouses, and now they're owned by 2. Rather than Disney side or Warner side, and you're going to pretend that they've got different investments. But you know what I mean? It's that kind of, we'll pretend there's an alternative, although secretly all of them follow the same fucking narrative. However, we're going to pretend there's an alternative.
I think the alternatives were all there, but the alternatives weren't necessarily in terms of narrative or what happened, but it was all about tone and content. Because people like, I mentioned Gore, the Gore novels by John Norman, they sold in massive numbers, but they were awful, misogynistic, really, really poor. And then you had, I think I've mentioned this before as well, probably a couple of times on the podcast, there was a series by someone called E.C. Tubb called the Doom Arrest Saga that ended up going up into the 30s. But they sold, and they were continually in print in the 60s and 70s. What really kind of agrees me to a degree about growing up and moving on and prioritising your life is I gave probably 2/3 of those books to charity shops when I moved from Hull to Bradford, and I guarantee
just to pause it for a moment. Even the retriever grumbled at that.
Yeah.
See, can you hear that?
Yeah. The largest proportion of those books will no longer be in print.
Yeah. Logan feels your pain.
So much of that stuff was in print because that stuff sold, and people who were writing pretty low quality sci-fi and fantasy could get published.
Oh God, everyone got published in the 70s. That's how it feels. I don't think that's the real world, because obviously, our understanding of the creative process in this world of media is very contained. It's like, is this going to sell? Is this going to make big bucks? Can we string 20 seasons of this shit to you?
Yeah. And
how can we recycle it to you? So if you can buy the merchandise, I think we discussed this before, you're in.
Yeah. I mean, Loz and I, we've decided we're going to cover another one of my granddad's hand-me-downs. There was a series of 6 books by a guy called Mike Sirota, who wrote the stories of Danis. And we're going to cover a book called Danis and the Dark Straits of Regalathium.
Right. Signed up for
and
it.
It's
okay.
Fucking garbage.
How many 20 books am I reading of this?
But it's kind of funny. And yeah, tons and tons and tons of those books, but actually some good ones as well. All went to charity shops.
Out of 20 books, come on.
They won't be in print anymore. It's a real shame. So, but there you go.
Amazon, if you'd like to sponsor this podcast, we'd be very grateful for your money.
It's amazing how many British authors are in print in Britain. Or actually,
how many British authors do you don't hear about? If you hadn't directed me to Dragonlance with 2 female authors.
Well, Tracy Hickman is a man.
Is a man.
Because in America, Tracy can be a man's name as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
However, I haven't yet read, and I'm only a third of the way through the Chronicles, I haven't yet read the description of her breast heaving with the excitement and her nipples almost overflowing beyond her corset that she finds so comfortable to wear during fights.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to read those Dragonlance books again.
And then we'll discuss it. Yeah. Now you fucking nagged me about it, mate.
Yeah. Now my failing memory has resulted in me asking the question 17 times.
7 times?
You've actually gone out
only
and bought them.
A mere 7 times. Yeah. Have you read them? Is it you who's read them? I haven't fucking read them.
There is somebody I know who's read them. That's why I kept saying, is it you?
It will be me. It will be me. Just give them another week.
Yeah. So I'm going to have to dig them off the shelf because I ain't read them since I was at senior school. Maybe even junior school. Come to think of it, I'll have to
But
look
they
at the
work
publication
well.
dates.
No, they work well because it's not over-sexualised like the modern fantasy where everyone's going to have big tits and everyone's going to shag everyone, but they're going to have to shag over someone else. And the conundrum because they're human, they're not. Carry on.
Well, you know what? There we shall wrap it up because the next chapter is the Battle of the Camargue, and I think we need to leave that for the beginning of the next episode.
Dickhead.
So,
dickhead. Just dickhead. Classic fantasy dickhead, but
I shall raise my glass of Angostura rum and say once again, thanks for being a guest on Breakfast with the Ruined podcast.
To the audience, I apologise, but, we are, again, several glasses of rum inside for me. And the last one, because we introduced it again, we're drinking some nice Angostura rum. We didn't mention the beer we had for breakfast.
Yeah.
I
don't think anybody will notice.
No one noticed. No one cares. However, there was an essence because I'm not on Facebook I am on Facebook, but I'm not on Twitter. So Andrew shared me some of these comments. I'm like, did they not realise we were pissed? And this is the conversation we have every time we're pissed. This is not a different conversation because we think we are academically reviewing these concept in a
I don't think anybody
in a sensible sort of like this is a balanced perspective of what these people think about. No, this is Andrew and I when we get together and we have a certain amount of drink with a certain amount of dogs and a certain amount of fantasy books, this turns into every conversation. This isn't a special conversation we've gone, we'll record this one because Amazon might buy it. Amazon buy it. But this was just like why don't we talk about things? And you're like, why don't we do a podcast? I'm like, you do what the fuck you want, Andrew. Me and you will listen to it. Happy with that. 100 people listen to it. I'm like, what the fuck? And then it's like, but most of them aren't in England. I'm like, that makes me feel a little bit better. If they're not in England, then I'm not going to walk in somebody in a job interview who goes, aren't you the person who talked about taking mushrooms in a discussion about Moorcock? And I'm thinking, no, that's not. That must be a completely different Natasha. Yeah, he's nodding. Nodding. We're all comfortable.
Yeah.
We're all happy. So thank you to me. Thank you to you. Good night from me. Good night from him. And you have no idea what the next book's bringing to you. Although it's 84 pages. If you can be bothered to listen to me and Andrew. Are you still recording?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you can be bothered to listen to us and my dog's tail's wagging and the woman's being drunk and the merry new decade to you we wish you, and the fact that we are still living in the Grand Baton timeline that I keep warning about, but Andrew's like, yeah, it's alright. You should meet us in our day jobs because you'd laugh your fucking ass off.
Yeah, not in my day job, I won't. Not anymore.
Not anymore. Only because he's taking it seriously, world. Don't take him seriously. Just because you take it seriously, Andrew, doesn't mean we take it seriously.
Yeah.
And, good luck to you. Book 3's coming. Book 3, more exciting than you can imagine. This eyeless, soulless bastard who's worked for the bad guys who are just steal as his daughter will be quits. I think we're someone to prefer here, aren't we? So, still as a daughter, we'll call it quits. We'll be happy. Natasha can't put her tongue to the top of her mouth, so any words that take more enunciation is out. But book 3, we might change your life. His eyes might spark. It might be at a point where you think, what? You might think, but everything else was alright, but this is a problem. But this is a problem. Fucking do it.
Say night, Natasha.
Night, Natasha.
Thanks for sticking with us through this, probably the most challenging show to date for a variety of reasons, but mostly due to booze and my amateurish technical abilities as a podcaster. Tash did request a redo on this show, but I thought, no, this is us, warts and all. We have learned perhaps to dial back a little bit for part 3. We might cut down on the pre-run beers, but we'll see. Things will take their natural course. Thanks as ever to show patrons Norman, Fred, Malpertius, Matt, David and Tom. Big appreciation. And thanks to the Twitter community for their support and feedback. And speaking of the Twitterati, congrats to Menion, aka Rob, one of the earliest proponents of this show, who you may recall from our Moorcock's birthday episode. He's launched his own podcast, Confessions of a Wee Timorous Bushy. Great work, Rob. Really enjoyable listen. I hope to listen to many more. But most of all, thanks to my old mucker Neil once again for his excellent support in kicking the mess that was the recording of this show into some sort of shape. And thanks to both Neil and Loz for the use of the intro and outro music in the show from their old band Giant Kind. I'll be back soon with part 3 of Elric of Melniboné with Loz, and phase 2 of the final programme with Hussein, who, despite his general stance on sci-fi and fantasy, has agreed to continue down the Moorcock rabbit hole. And of course, once we have Elric of Melniboné in the can, I'll need another read for Loz. He wants to start off down the Coram trail, but I might throw that open to a vote just to annoy him. But more details on that soon via the blog, the Patreon page, and Twitter. So, once again, thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the Moonbeam Roads.